start, yeah. Let's start webinar. So,
hi, everybody. We're going to let our participants start joining us. I see that people are starting to join, so we'll give it just a couple minutes before we get started. And then we're going to get into all this good stuff, talking about all things recruiting and hiring, and getting some really great feedback and tips and tricks from the professionals that do this every day. Give it just one more minute. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody. My name is Rebecca Abel. I am the program manager for employer engagement and career services here at Pima Community College. Before we get started in all of these burning questions that we have to ask our panel, I want to introduce Denise Kingman, who is our Director of Employer Engagement and Career Services. And she'd like to do a little introduction as we get started this evening. So Denise, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Becca. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. We want to thank our guests and our honored panelists that we have today. And we're doing this in honor of Hispanic Serving Institutions Week, which we are a proud Hispanic serving institution here at Pima Community College, and for Hispanic Heritage Month. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists and let them tell you where they work and a little bit about themselves. So first, Diane Satello.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad that you're here joining us. This is going to be fun and exciting. My name is Diane Satello. I'm the HR manager for employee engagement and workforce development in the city of Tucson. City of Tucson employs about 4,000 people in about 14 different departments, and we have pretty much any job that you can imagine. And so we're super glad to answer your questions about the job hunt. I personally oversee all of the new employee orientation. So if you do get a job with us, I'll be welcoming you. And all of our supervisor development, leadership development, and all of our workforce development and all of our training. So I'm super glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Great. Thank you. Latia Aguirre.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Yes, my name is Latia Aguirre. I am a recruiter at Leonardo. We are a manufacturing company here in Tucson. We're approximately about 200 employees at our Tucson office, and I have been with Leonardo for approximately 9 years. And in my current role, I focus on talent acquisition.
Great, thank you. Becca, I'm going to send it back over to you.
Awesome. Okay, so Diane and Letty, really quick question for you guys. Can you guys share a little bit more about some of the different types of roles that you hire for within your companies? So I know we're going to have a lot of students wondering, what are they hiring for? What are they looking for? So share some of those types of roles with them. And Diane, you can go ahead and go first. I should probably do that. Sorry.
I'll go first. We have a long list. And actually, it would be really cool if somebody could drop our job apps link there. And if not, I can do it myself a little bit later. But anything and everything that you can imagine, from part-time positions at Parks and Rec, right? Anything from lifeguard, kidco, all those types of things, to police officers, firefighters, people in the water department, anything from office staff to hydrologists to chemists. Gosh, pretty much anything and everything you can think of to make the city of Tucson go, we hire. So we have electricians, we have plumbers, we have carpenters, we have finance staff, we have HR staff, we have the people that pay you every 2 weeks.
Important jobs.
Yeah, important jobs. And so we're just constantly hiring right now. We are hiring for heavy duty mechanics, property agents, construction engineers, and managers. So tons of opportunities with the city of Tucson.
Awesome. Great. And we'll throw the the link to City of Tucson applications like you mentioned. And Letty, what about you? Kind of share with us some of the different types of roles that you guys typically hire for.
Sure. So we have anywhere from entry-level positions to SVP positions currently. So it's just mainly engineering. There's and the entry-level positions could be operator, assembly operator in our production area, as well as technicians as well in our production area. We also have logistics supervisor. We have also IT positions currently, test engineers, like I mentioned. Also in our maintenance, we have equipment maintenance technicians. So just also a variety of open positions.
Lots of opportunities.
Yes, lots of opportunities.
Awesome. Love that. We'll also put some information about Leonardo in the chat as well.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Daisy. Welcome. Daisy, would you like to introduce yourself and the company that you're with and kind of some of the things that you guys are hiring for?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm a little late. I was hopping off another meeting.
No worries.
I am with the Building Talent Foundation. I'm the engagement manager for Tucson and Phoenix. And we have just about every job you can think of in the construction space. So we have HVAC positions, we have electrician positions, plumber, carpentry. We also work with the suppliers and manufacturers of the builders. So we have, the cabinet manufacturing positions, we have painting positions, everything that goes into making a house, we have those positions. So just to give you an idea, we have about 5,000 jobs between 3 states.
Wow. No big deal.
No.
I love it. Well, welcome you guys. I'm super excited for tonight. One of my favorite topics to talk about is all things recruiting and hiring and helping students kind of demystify the process of what do I need to put on my resume? What do I need to do to prepare for an interview? All of these questions that get us so nervous and keep us up at night before we're getting ready to apply or go in for an interview. So that's what we're going to be focusing on tonight. We're going to be doing this in a few different sections. So we're going to start with talking about resumes, right? Resume is kind of the most important piece to getting an interview, right? You have to have your resume. Then we're going to talk a little bit about interviews and all things interviewing and how to prepare and answer some of those hard questions. And then we're going to go into other, which has a bunch of different random stuff that has come in from students. At the end of today, any questions that have come in via chat, our amazing student Senator Namu is going to be asking those of you guys. So anything that the students are dying to know. So let's jump into resumes. Diane, this first question, I'm going to start with you. And the question is, how long does a recruiter really actually look at a resume, right? You've heard 5 seconds, you've heard 30 seconds. What's the truth?
Well, okay. So the answer to all questions this whole time is it depends, right? So it always depends. That's the real answer to all questions. But it depends on a number of things, right? One of the things that you want the recruiter to be able to do is be able to see who you are in that quick 5 seconds, to engage them, to be able to get in front of them and do that interview so that they can spend some time really looking at it while they're engaging with you. So you kind of have to prepare both for the 5-second glance overview and like make some things pop, right? Like they're walking in, they're like, wow, wow, wow. They call you in and then they have time to sit down and interview you. And then they have that resume in front of them. They go, oh, get past the wow. And there's also awesome.
That is definitely the reaction we want to have from a resume.
Yeah,
for sure. So we're going to talk here in a minute about what those wow, awesome things are on the resume. Letty, what about you? When you see a resume, how long do you typically spend?
Yeah, and I'm with Diane. It just depends, right? And it depends on the role as well. But I would say anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute. Yeah, before I decide whether I want to interview this person. Yeah.
Daisy, what about you?
I am with the ladies, and I'm gonna say it depends as well. But typically, I know if I'm interested in the resume or not in the first 30 seconds to a minute as well.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, so that everybody that's listening, not a long time. right? You don't have a whole lot of time to get that first impression. So that resume, it's really critical that you have the right pieces and the right components from the get-go. So that brings us to our next question, which I'm going to start with you, Letty, on this one. What are the most important things to have on a resume? What is like a non-negotiable? You have to have these things.
Obviously the skills. What I'm looking for in a resume, is that the question?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I'm looking also for gaps in employment. I'm looking for the length of service at each job. Those are absolutely crucial, right? And it pretty much lets me know, right? Kind of tells me about the person
Okay.
when I'm looking at that.
Awesome. And you brought up an important thing right there, saying gaps in employment. That's something that we're going to talk a little bit more about here in a second. So for any of you on the call that are saying, tell me more about that. What should I do if I have a gap? We're going to talk about that. So give us just a few more questions to get there. Diane, what about you? What are some things that you want to see on a resume? What are some must-haves that students need to make sure they put on there?
Yeah, I agree with Letty. Non-negotiables is skills. Put those right up front. What can you do?
Mhm.
Right. If you can do Excel, we need to know that. We don't want to guess. And I think second to that, at least with the city of Tucson, oftentimes we are looking for minimum qualifications. And so I think the big thing for students to remember is don't assume that we know what that job title means or what that job is about. Because we're looking to see if you meet the minimum qualifications. So if the minimum qualifications, for example, says you have to have been a supervisor for 2 years, then you need to explicitly write that out, right? Supervised X amount of employees from this date to this date, because we're not going to guess, it might say store manager or regional manager, and that we could maybe assume that that means that you supervise some people, but we don't want to be guessing. We want to know, like, can you do Excel? Yes or no. Have you been a supervisor? Yes or no. And so for us, it's really important to look at what we call MQs, right?
Okay.
Minimum qualifications, and whatever it says that we're looking for, that's what we're looking for.
Awesome. That's great. And you brought up a really interesting point when you were saying, like, don't make us guess, put it on there. And you said the numbers, the percentages. I supervised X number of employees. So, and you guys are the masters here when it comes to this area. But I've seen and I've heard that when students are putting together like their experience, right, and they're wanting to show that they can do the job, it's really, really critical that they use numbers and data and percentages to show the results in that position. So don't just put, I supervise people, put how many, right? Is that right on target? I see lots of head nods. Cool, great. Daisy, what about you? When you look at a resume, what do you want to see? What are your non-negotiables? What has to be on there?
Skills have to be on there for sure. And skills and abilities. And I like it when people show off on their resume. Like, I like it when they tell me that they supervised 500 people, or that they grew their market by so much percent. I like when they show off with numbers. It just makes me more excited to look at their resume and continue reading it.
Right. It shows them the results. It shows you the results that they've achieved, not just what they've done, the responsibility piece.
Mhm.
So we've talked a lot about skills. Where should they put their skills on their resume? Where does that belong? Diane, what do you think?
Right up front. I want to know what you know right up front. Don't make
So
me
on the
guess.
top, like under
Don't make me
contact
look for it.
information?
Yep, right up front. I want to know what you know. Particularly, I think both the ladies said IT. We're looking for IT, and if there's a specific certification or something that you've earned, that really needs to be right up front. In addition to, I think the experiences, each of your job experiences should have those skills embedded within them as well. So we want to know, what did you actually do when you were there? Just
Right.
like I said, spell it out. Don't make us guess.
Right. Absolutely. You guys also hit on, when we kind of started this question, a few of you mentioned, the job description, the skills. So what advice would you have for the students then to match the job description to their resume? Because we talk about that a lot with students. Make sure it matches. But what does that mean? How do they do that? Letty, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I was having a little bit of, I couldn't hear you. It was
No
kind of
worries.
cutting on and off. Can you repeat the question? I
Yeah,
apologize.
just when we're talking about skills and being able to show their skills, somebody mentioned the job description and looking at that job description and what's expected. How can they take the job description and use that job description to kind of put together their resume? What should they do?
I would say, just list, right, the duties, what they have experienced, to kind of just combine them. If, for example, if, you're assembling, just put what kind of assembly that you've done in the past, to kind of just, correlate with the skills that we're looking for.
Yeah. Okay, great. So take the job description, look at the things that you've done that are listed on that job description, and make sure those things are put on your resume is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. All relevant experience. Absolutely.
Awesome. Great. This was already super helpful. We still have a bunch of questions to go. So we're going to move on now to the flip side of making your resume awesome. And we're going to talk about making it not so awesome. So what are some things, and Daisy, I'm going to start with you on this one. What are some things that make you automatically pass on a resume when you see it, not even give it a second look?
Honestly, it's whenever I see a run-on sentence. The grammar is important. Whenever we're talking about industry keywords and they're misspelled on that resume, that makes me think, okay, you don't really know how to do this. You can't spell it, so they're off a little bit there. So that will make me not want to look at the resume and pass on to the next one.
Those are good things. And then even if maybe they do know what they're talking about, if it's still misspelled, it shows they didn't proofread. Maybe they're not taking this opportunity seriously enough,
Yes.
which can also be a big turnoff.
Right.
Diane, what about you? Things when you look at a resume that make you go, nope, not this one, not today.
Yeah, spelling's got to be right up there, especially like she said, like if you're applying for a community service officer and you're misspelling community and service and officer, like that's not going to get you in the door. So yeah, grammar is really important. And then run-on sentences, like she said, I prefer, and I know a lot of it is preference, but I think a lot of us prefer the bullet points with the action verbs right up front. We want to know just sort of at a glance, what did you do? I don't want to have to read a dissertation just to figure out what you did last week. Like,
right. Make it short, sweet, concise, to the point, something that really tells you guys like what they can do.
Painting a picture, right? Like we're putting all these little puzzle pieces together, and we want to see this beautiful finished product when we're done.
Awesome. Letty, what about you? Things you do not want to see on a resume.
Okay. Well, I would say jumping from job to job. So if I'm, if there's multiple jobs in short amount of time, that's huge. I think that's kind of a red flag from the get-go.
Okay. So now I'm going to pose the question to the three of you with a few other things that we have all seen on resumes. How do you guys feel about pictures on resumes? Diane, you can start with that one if you want to.
Well, so our system's a little different, I think, because we take all of our applications through the job app system. And I would say I would hesitate to tell you to use pictures because it's probably not going to show up very well, right? You got to also remember that we're, in addition to like kind of downloading them sometimes and printing them sometimes the font comes across a little different. So I would say if you wanted to do a picture, and I know that there's a lot of really cool ones out there, that might be like if you have an in-person interview and you're ready to present it, so you're guaranteed that it's going to look well. But if you start getting too creative with the font and the formatting, then there's no guarantee that us on the other end of it, once it's kind of been uploaded and once it's sort of downloaded and forwarded and printed and scanned and all this other stuff, there's no guarantee that it's going to look like what you thought it was going to look like. So pictures are definitely nice, and the font and the format is definitely nice, but I think it needs to be either ready to hand in person, or maybe just make sure that it's a PDF that is able to upload so that it maintains its integrity and it looks like what you thought it was going to look like.
Sure. Sure. This, it's funny that I just asked this question because Miguel, one of our student senators who's in the chat, just asked, is it true that recruiters pass on resumes that have colors or design? So there we go. So it's, if you're asking the question, just probably don't, because just make it easy. Just make it clean, easy format is what I'm hearing. How do you guys feel about people who put their actual photos on the resume, like their pictures, like their actual face? Daisy, I'll let you start with that one.
I don't mind it, but we typically use ATS systems, and it seems like they don't pick up the resumes with the pictures on them. I like pictures on the cover letter. I would say put your picture on the cover letter all the way, but not on the resume unless it's like Diane mentioned, in person, that you're handing it to the person.
Yeah. Okay. And Letty, what about you?
I don't mind the pictures. I think they look great. It just tells me that they took time to make their resume look nice. I don't get many resumes. Engineers don't really.
Sure. They're a little more to the point.
Yes. But I think it's a nice touch.
Okay. All right. So what about LinkedIn profiles? Do you guys like to see a student or an applicant include a LinkedIn profile? And if so, do you actually look at their LinkedIn profile? And Diane, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, for sure. So make sure that your LinkedIn profile and your resume match, right? You're painting that picture and you want to be painting that same picture. If there's any questions or inconsistencies, that might be a cause to sort of pass and go, they're trying to paint two different pictures here. But for sure, all of the LinkedIn profiles are really important. I would also take this opportunity to say just social media in general. If you're students and you're out there and you have social media pages that you don't want a recruiter to see, right? If you're doing things that are a little too lively on the weekend, you might consider either making those private or hiding them, or maybe just think twice and don't post things that you wouldn't want your mom or your recruiter to see. Because oftentimes, right, we will find things on the internet before you take them down, and then it's going to cause us a little apprehension on whether or not you're the right fit for our organization. So I think that's a good call out for social media awareness right here.
Yep. And that could be a whole training and topic on itself. I feel like that needs to be like 2.0, like the next version of this call. What about email addresses? So, do people's email addresses sometimes make you guys go, I don't know about this one? I'm seeing some head nods. Daisy, do you want to take this one?
Yes. I would say use an email address that sounds professional. You don't want to use like MacDaddy21, something you would not share with your mom. Don't use that. Something you don't want your mom and your grandma and your recruiter to see. Don't put that on there, but make it a professional email, something, simple as well, so that, the recruiter doesn't have a hard time remembering, a long email address or, a funny email address on there.
Yep. Letty, anything to add?
No, I agree with the ladies. I've always thought, everybody should have two separate email addresses, right? One, a professional one, and one for friends and family. But yes, I agree.
So good tips. And I'm just going to call that out to everybody on the call, because what we're hearing is the email is really important, right? Perception is reality a lot of times in this entire process. So make sure that you are being perceived as this amazing rock star that Diane wants to reach out to, that Daisy, Letty want to reach out to. When it comes to the email address, if you have an email address that makes you go, I don't know, is this professional or is it? It's not. If you're asking, just make a new one. And the advice that we give to students a lot over here in Employer Engagement Career Services is to create that second email address. So like Letty was just saying, once you start applying to jobs, it can be like a full-time thing in itself. And you're going to want to have one place where all of your messages and your confirmation emails and your communication from recruiters is going. So definitely something to consider is creating a second email professional email. So thank you guys for that. That's awesome. So we're going to now go on to the next question. And Diane, this is going to be for you. So, we have students at Pima that are from all different walks of life, right? We have everybody from brand new students to people who are returning, right? Because they want to get a better job, they want to upskill, and everything in between. So we get questions a lot from students who have a significant amount of work experience. And they're always wondering, should I put all, 15, 20 years of my work experience on my resume? And if not, how far back should I go? And how do I decide? So it's kind of a loaded question, but give us your thoughts on people with lots of work experience and how they can best showcase that on their resume.
Right. So I think I have 2 bits of advice.
Sure.
So if it's more than 10 years, you might consider putting it up in that skill section that we talked about, right? So like if you have 20 years of experience in graphic design, that's awesome. Put it up there in that skill section or that knowledge section. But you don't want to have a 42-page resume that says like everything you did starting when you were a babysitter at age 14. Right?
Right.
You just want to hit the general rule of thumb, I think, is the last 10 years is really relevant and pertinent. And then anything past that, just go ahead and consolidate it into your skills. So 20 years of graphic design or 30 years of a mechanic or whatever it is that you can hit the highlights without giving us a full-blown 42-page timeline of everything you've done.
So just put up there in that skills section that you have, a significant amount of experience and what that looks like from a numbers perspective, how many years you might have. And then would you say just focus on the last 10 years for the resume?
The last 10 years is really a good rule of thumb. I mean, there's always wiggle room, right? If there was like the 11th year that you did something fabulous, don't leave it off. But if it's just more of the same, we're going to get bored and pass. Like we talked about the very first question, right? That 30 seconds is gone.
Right. Yeah. And I've read articles that really the real estate on a resume is that top part. And if we have multiple pages, nobody's going to end up ever looking at that anyway. So really focus on getting it in the front and center. Letty, anything to add to that?
Yes, actually, if it is 10 to, or 20 years experience, I would just add the experience that's relevant to the job that you're applying for, and go back, like Diane said, 10 years, as far as 10 years.
Okay, great. Daisy, anything else to add to that one?
No, I agree with both of the ladies.
Okay, great. So this next question, Letty, I'm going to start with you on. So like I said, Pima is made up of so many different amazing types of students. We also have a lot of students that come to us that don't have a lot of work experience yet. So what advice do you have for a student that doesn't have a lot of that experience? What should they put on their resume and how can they make themselves stand out?
Sure. I would say volunteer work, any professional clubs or organizations that they've been a member of. And then the big thing I've always, liked to see is a cover letter. That makes you stand out. If you don't have a lot of work experience, it's a good opportunity for the recruiter or the employer to see who you are.
Yeah, awesome. Daisy, anything to add to that?
No, I agree with Letty as well.
Diane, what about you? Any advice you can give to students that don't have a lot of experience?
I absolutely agree. Volunteer experience is often overlooked, right? Sometimes we think, well, I didn't get paid for it, so I shouldn't put it on my resume. No, like if you've done volunteer work, add it there. And if it doesn't go under experience, that's fine too. You can have a whole other section that says community activities or even training. I love to see that people are certified in things. And I love to see that they have taken some additional coursework, right? So yeah, I mean, experience is definitely important, but don't overlook that community service and those activities that you've done and all of the other things that make you unique. And also remember that we're looking at so many different resumes and so many different cover letters. We want to see what you can offer us in our organization. So if you feel that it's relevant, then please add it. And I agree with the cover letter thing too. I love cover letters.
And we're going to talk about cover letters tonight as well. So we're going to loop back on that one. right now we're going to go to talking about gaps in employment, which I know already came up earlier in the conversation, but it's something that I wanted to dive into a little bit more, because gaps in employment can happen, right? We leave the workforce for so many different reasons. And then we return and job seekers are kind of faced with, how do I explain this gap? What do I do here? So, Diane, I'm going to start with you on this. What advice do you have for, students, job seekers who do have those gaps in employment? What should they do?
So personally, I'm not opposed to gaps in employment because, we're kind of in a whole different world. This pandemic has sort of thrown us all for a totally different direction. So I think there's a lot more leeway than there used to be. So I would just say, if you have gaps in employment, that's fine. Be prepared to explain it when you get to that interview phase, right? Be prepared to have a justification or a reason or something that you were doing in that time period. Like, I think a gap is not as important as being able to explain the gap, right? Like, we want to be able to say, hey, I took these 2 years. I mean, I remember when I went back to get my master's degree, I took 2 years off of work. Like, I was busy going and getting my master's degree. That was a really good explanation for
Right.
why I had a gap in employment. So yeah, just be prepared to explain those things. And if the sequence fits and you're working on it on the resume, there might be a place for there under training or degrees or whatever that matches up with your timeline. Or back to what we had talked about, cover letter. That's an excellent opportunity right up front in that cover letter to sort of introduce yourself and say, this is where I've been, this is what I've been up to, and just be prepared to have a really good rationale as to why, we don't want to just like, oh, I was on the couch for 8 years and then now I decided I wanted a job.
Right. No, definitely don't want that.
Yeah.
So be prepared to talk about it. Letty, anything to add? Because I know that kind of this gap in employment came up a little bit when we were talking with you earlier in the conversation.
No, I think Diane explained it very well. Just be prepared to justify it, to explain. Yes.
Awesome. Great. And Daisy, anything else to add to it?
No, I also think, like, if you list it on there as part of your work history, that's fine as well. Like, if you were a stay-at-home mom, that sometimes is a job. There's other things that go into that. So I would list if you were, getting your master's degree, or if you were a homemaker. That's just list it on there so that they don't have those questions. And also be prepared, if you don't list them, to answer why you have those gaps in employment.
Yeah. So it sounds like just be upfront, just put it on there, so that the recruiter doesn't have to guess on it, and it's right there and it's out in the open. And it's not a big deal. It's okay. Great. Awesome, guys. Okay. So that concludes the resume part. So we can all take a big collective sigh as we move into talking about interviews, right? So you've obviously had a great resume. It's gotten you to the point of an interview. So we're going to jump into that now. Interviews can be so very nerve-wracking, for anybody, even those of us that interview all day long. So what are some of your guys' tips? And Diane, we'll start with you, for making a good impression in an interview. And let's specifically start with talking about phone interviews. So those initial first phone calls, how can a student make a good impression in that initial call with a recruiter?
Well, so I can tell you what I do wrong all the time, if that
Okay,
helps.
tell us.
I get really nervous and I ramble. So be prepared to slow yourself down if you're like me and you ramble. Also, if it's a phone interview, have some written notes in front of you so that if you do get nervous and you do stumble, you can look right to it and remember those keywords. Always remember the job that you're applying for. Sometimes we tend to be really generic, like, I want a job. Okay. That's different than I have skills in, Excel, and I've been doing it and I'm prepared to help you with Excel.
Right.
So you really want to know what you're going for. You want to have some little notes jotted in front of you. You want to really align yourself with the job really well and be prepared to explain yourself really well. So, and in my case, like, slow down, stop panicking. I'm like, ah,
You get so excited and you just
Yeah.
don't stop. That's all right. So, okay, the student makes it past the phone interview, right? They're celebrating. Now they're getting invited for a face-to-face interview, right? So we're talking about post-COVID world and kind of coming back to, life after COVID world where things are starting to go back into person. What advice, Letty, do you have for somebody who is getting ready to go in for their first face-to-face interview? How can they prepare? What tips and insight can you give them?
Sure. I would say dress professionally. That's always right. Your first opportunity for first impressions.
Yep.
Be positive in showing interest, ask questions. Those are, I think those are probably the top on my list.
Okay. Should they bring extra copies of their resume with them, or is that not needed?
That's always a nice touch. But usually in my case, right, I always try to have a copy ready, but that's always nice. It shows that the candidate's always is prepared. So, and ready. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, Daisy, I'm going to go to you. In current COVID world / a lot of businesses are still staying virtual. And this is actually a question that came in on our panel earlier in the week that I wanted to ask you guys tonight. What can a candidate do? What can a student or a job seeker do to prepare specifically for a virtual interview?
I think you would do the same thing as a face-to-face interview. You would treat it the same. You would research the company. You would think of good questions to ask at the end of the interview. And like Diane mentioned, relax and don't ramble, don't get nervous. Yeah, that's it. Just treat it like it was an in-person interview. Have a good attitude. Be happy about it. Be excited about the position. That always gets me whenever somebody is excited about one of my positions. That it makes me feel like they're really interested in the company, and they would make a great candidate for the role.
Great. Diane, what do you think about when it comes to preparing for a virtual interview, the environment that they're in, how they're dressing? Can you share some tips on those two areas for me?
I will tell you, you really need to test your microphone and your speakers ahead of time. If you could just, if you find out it's on Zoom or Teams or whatever, just practice with a friend ahead of time. Make sure that all of your background is appropriate. You're not facing a way that somebody's going to come running, screaming behind you, because we've seen all of that. We've also seen that people, are not turning off their cell phones, both in-person interviews and phone interviews and Zoom interviews. So they're in the middle of talking to you, and all of a sudden you're like, hold on.
Oh, no.
We don't want to see any of that. We want to be like, we're here, we're engaged, everything works. There's nothing weird going on behind me. So practice, take it seriously, get there 5 minutes early so you know where you're going if it's in person. We've had people that, have gotten lost, and it's like, okay, practice the day before, like drive to wherever you think you're going the day before. If it's in person, or if it's on Zoom, then call somebody on Zoom the day before to make sure that it works and it looks fine.
Yep. Lay your clothes out the night before. Make sure that they're clean, right? Yeah. I mean, I know for me, how many times have we been in a rush to get out of the house? You get halfway out and you realize, oh my gosh, I have something on my shirt, right? Even for virtual interviews, though, it's really important. It's important how you choose to present yourself. So thank you for those tips. Letty, anything that you want to add to preparing for virtual interviews in terms of environment, appearance, things like that?
No, I think it was pretty much covered. Limiting the distractions is definitely.
Yep. Great. Okay, so our next question, and Letty, I'm going to start with you, so don't go off mute just yet. What questions, because at the end of interviews, recruiters, hiring managers always say, okay, do you have any questions for us? Do they need to have questions? And if yes, what questions should they be asking?
I think asking questions is always good. It shows that they're very interested in the position. Just questions that are, to make sure that, it is a good fit for them, that the role that they're applying for is a good fit. Yeah.
Awesome. And Diane, what about you?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I really enjoy knowing that somebody prepared for the position. It shows that they really want it. So questions that show that you've done your research, right? If you are applying for, let's say, I don't know, a water meter, somebody who's going to be out there in the field, doing a meter reading, you want to ask a question like maybe, I'm curious as to, what the situation is with hydration. Do I bring my own water, or do you have a policy on how we stay hydrated? That shows that, wow, okay, you didn't just read the description, but you actually know that you're going to have to stay hydrated.
Right.
Yeah. So
That's great.
So you don't have to be super specific by any means, but it does definitely give you some credibility when you show that you've done your research.
Yeah.
And I do think it's always a good idea to, if not ask a question, then at least make a statement. So if you say, I really don't have any questions to ask, but I want to thank you for this opportunity to interview. Again, it's been my pleasure.
Yep.
Something that's really gonna like tie up the end of the process, where you're actually saying, thank you so much. I really want to deliver exceptional service to the people of Tucson, and I'm excited to be your new employee.
Yeah, that's awesome. So pulling in some of the mission or the vision or the values from the company, asking questions about some of those areas or making a statement about them shows that you've done that research and that you're engaged and you're excited about working for that specific company. Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, so the next question is going to be around thank you notes, right? Thank you notes. Yes, no. Are they a good thing? Do they help you get hired or not so much? And Letty, I'll start with you on this one.
Sure. So I think it's a nice touch, and I definitely believe it helps you stand out, be remembered. Yes, that's I would say, not necessarily needed, but it is a nice touch.
Awesome. Diane, what about you?
It depends.
No, really?
Yeah. So we have two types of positions. Well, two main types. We have lots of different types, but two main types of positions here at the City of Tucson. We have appointed positions and civil service positions. And in a civil service interview, those panelists have the rating system right in front of them, and you're in your oral board, and they're scoring right in front of, and then at the end of that process, they hand everything in, and you may or may not make it on a certified list. So if you send a thank you card the next day, it's super nice, awesome, wonderful, but it's not going to impact your score, because that score is happening right at that time when you're doing the oral boards and you're rating. What it will do, however, is leave a good impression, right? So let's say maybe you don't make it on the civil service list, or maybe you, are 2 or 3 or something, and then there's another opportunity that comes up that might maybe trigger people to be like, hey, didn't we see this person before? Or, hey, it might trigger some really positive thoughts. And I think having positive thoughts about it, individuals, is really never a bad thing. You think, oh, that was that person that was really considerate. Now in our appointed positions, they're more probably closely linked to what Letty does. And that's, pretty much have a little bit more time and a little bit more discussion. And then there's a little bit more wiggle room to have those thank you cards and stuff. So those definitely would be more appropriate, because people have time after that interview to really think about it and discuss it. But yeah, if it's a civil service job, we're rating you right then and there when you're talking to us, and we're turning in those sheets.
Great. So I'm hearing it's never a bad thing. Do it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily going to impact the hiring decision.
Right. Might not.
And should they mail it? Should they do snail mail? Should they send an email? What do you guys think?
What do you think,
Email.
Letty? Email's better.
Email. Absolutely.
Yeah. I used to think that getting stuff in the mail was kind of cool a few years ago, but since we've been with this whole pandemic thing, we don't really go to the office very often, or once or twice a week, so we may not get it. So email's definitely quicker.
Email for the current world that we're in.
Yes.
Got
also
it.
paperless is always good.
Love it. I love it. Great. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to make a little pivot from talking about interviews. We're going to go into our other section, kind of a catch-all, if you will. And I'd like to introduce everybody to Rochelle. Rochelle is our student intern. She works with Denise and I over here in Employer Engagement and Career Services. And she's going to take this section and ask you guys a couple burning questions. So Rochelle, it's all you. Go ahead and take yourself off mute.
Thank you. Thanks for being here with us today. So one of the questions, so we touched on like LinkedIn profile and like what social media should look like. So I did want to kind of do like more of a follow-up question to it for you, Diane, about like, do you have an example when you have looked at a social media profile based off of something you saw based off of before you do the interview because you saw something on the resume, on the cover letter, and like what was that determining factor that made you say, you know what, maybe I should like do a double check or something?
Yeah. So one time we were, I can't remember what we were interviewing for. It was like an entry-level job, maybe an admin assistant or something. And we had come across the person's, we were like, it to be fair, we did it with everybody in that position because it was like a public information position where that person was going to be in front of the media. And yeah, their social media was basically like, I hate my job. This is like and it was like, okay, we definitely don't want to hire a person who's, if they're having a bad day, is going to be out there on social media telling everybody they're having a bad day. That's, we don't really want to see that in everybody's sort of day-to-day interaction, right? It's not to say that people can't have bad days. Everyone here has had a bad day. But there's, that's what your personal group of friends is for. That's what your text messages are for. That's what your in-person conversation with your friends are for. When you're sort of putting your employee out there on blast, on social media, then that just sort of leads us to think, man, if we do hire this person and then they have a bad day, forget it. It's like they're putting all their dirty laundry out there. The other things that we've done is, like I had mentioned before, the city of Tucson, delivering exceptional service to the people of Tucson, hire police officers and firefighters and paramedics and public safety communications. So a lot of really important jobs in public safety. So we have definitely passed on a lot of those candidates because of the choices that they are making that don't quite either they either feel like they're illegal, immoral, or unethical. Right? Because we don't want any police officers, firefighters, paramedics, or actually any of our employees that are doing things that are illegal, immoral, unsafe. We've had people doing really unsafe things, and we're hiring you to keep the streets safe, and you're doing things that are unsafe in your social media, then that's probably not a good indicator that we want you to come work for us, right? So yeah, tons of stuff has just sort of not been okay with social media.
No, thank you for that feedback. I think it's definitely important to have that professional front, especially when you're on these platforms, because it is representing the company on the front end to those people in your social circles. So thank you for having that feedback and sharing it with us all so that we can ensure that we're not doing that when we're going through these processes. So this next question is for you, Letty, and it is, what is your favorite interview question to ask? Why, and how can students best answer it?
Okay, thank you. So my favorite question to ask is, what did you like most about your current or your previous position? And I like to ask that question because it gives me clarity as to why are they planning on leaving? Why did you leave? Also, what's important to the candidate, right? And the best way to answer is to be honest and specific. For example, did you like the people? Did you, your manager, your supervisor, did you like the benefits at the company? Did you like your work schedule? So it just gives me more information.
Yeah, it's like more of like a detailed background and specific to that individual that like opens that door even more for you to see if
Absolutely.
It's like the best fit.
Right, absolutely.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to hand it back to Becca. so that we can continue on.
Thank
you so
you.
much.
Thank you.
All right, so now what we're going to do is we are going to hop over to one of our amazing student senators that I introduced in the beginning. And Nemu has been over in the chat. She's been kind of keeping an eye on things. And she also has a list of questions that had come in earlier in the week from students. So I want to pop it over to her to see what questions she has that she wants to ask in these last 10 minutes.
Hello, everyone. We've heard some really good things so far, but there were just a few questions that a couple of students sent over earlier this week. I know we spoke about cover letters briefly. My question to you is, do we need to have a cover letter when we apply, and why is it so important? It's open to anyone who wants to answer.
Okay. I can answer. So I think cover letters are, a nice touch. It also, it's important. It highlights your strengths, I think, right? And you don't want to add too much information, but you want to add just enough to let the employer know who you are. So, and that's your first opportunity, the cover letter.
I agree. I think cover letters are super important. They help paint that picture and help introduce you to us. And so we kind of want to see who you are. I would just also caution that be really meticulous about what the application is looking for. Because at least with the city of Tucson, right, we have part-time positions, temporary positions, full-time positions, civil service positions, appointed positions. And so sometimes those are required and you will not get back, you'll wonder like, well, nobody ever got, I didn't get an interview. Well, it was required that you had a cover letter and you didn't provide one. Other ones are optional, in which case I think optional usually means if you have it, go for it. Because it's not going to hurt. It's going to help. I mean, unless your cover letter has a lot of grammatical mistakes like we talked about. But yeah, it's going to help us. It's going to introduce you to us. And we really want to see who you are and what you're about. So definitely consider it, but definitely pay attention to the requirements for that job posting. It might ask for specific things for you to upload. And so make sure you're uploading each and everything that they are asking for.
I think you're on mute.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. I know I've done cover letters and I've always wondered if it's important, or do employers or interviewers actually pay attention to them, or are they a waste of time? But now that you've said it all, given us more insight into it, I see that it's very important to introduce yourself a little bit before they actually get to the resume. The next question I have is, what is the best advice you could give a student who is looking to gain experience in their career field, but has never actually stepped foot into it? They've never actually had an experience in it, and they're very new to that working field. What advice would you give them? Diane, I'll start with you.
Yeah, this is one where I'm going to encourage all of you to get outside of your comfort zone. I think a lot of times it's hard for us to reach out to strangers, but this might be one of those opportunities that you do, because there's a ton of us out here in the world who really enjoy mentoring others and job shadowing others. And you honestly, the worst thing that can happen is you can be told no. So, it could just be as simple as, let's say, for example, I was just clicking on one that said your resume is required. And it says, warning, you will not be invited to or aboard if you do not, do your resume and cover letter. It's the senior property agent for right-of-way acquisition, which I'm sure nobody knows what that is. But if you're interested in it, reach out to, there's always the contact number. and there's always a contact email, reach out and say, you know, I'm really interested in learning more about this position. Do you have an opportunity to job shadow, or do you have an opportunity to do some mentorship, or even can I just have a conversation on the phone? People are super thrilled when you say, I'm a student and I want to learn more. I'd like to have some of your time and maybe interview you. It could just be even a 30-minute interview. I did one not too long ago with one of the gals who's graduating from the U of A. She was getting her MBA, and she had been in finance, and she was really interested in HR. But she's like, honestly, she told the professor, I don't really know what HR is or what they do in HR. And he said, don't worry, I'll connect you with somebody. And so the professor reached out to me and said, would you mind getting in touch with the student? And I was like, absolutely. And so she and I had several 30-minute phone calls, and each of those 30 minutes phone calls was just a little bit of a Q&A of like, what do you do? What do you enjoy? You know, all those kind of things, so that she could decide like, do I really want to do this HR thing? It sounds fun on paper, but and her thing was like, she wanted to get out of finance, but she didn't really know what getting out of finance looked like. So
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Letty, do you have anything to add to that? Or
You know, Diane mentioned, right, the job shadowing, internships, similar, right? But internships are big. They're definitely a good way to, you know, learn the company as well as gain some skills as well.
I know you mentioned internships. I have noticed like some internship applications require some sort of experience. What if those students don't have experience? How can they still apply for an internship? Because at that point, they are trying to intern to gain experience, but no one's willing to give them prior experience. What would you suggest to those students?
You know, if there's relevant courses, you know, we look at that. For example, our entry-level positions, there's some of our, the apprentices are taking some AIT courses there at Pima, and you know, we're always promoting our internships there. But yes, the internships, you know, having some related coursework would certainly help.
Yeah, I
Thank you for
agree.
that.
And I also would add, again, this is the time that sometimes we have to get outside of our comfort zone. If you see a phone number on that job posting, I would be as bold, the direct, and ask that recruiter and say, hey, I'm looking at this internship and it looks really interesting. I don't know if I would still qualify. Would it be okay if? And then ask that. You know, that's why we put our phone numbers and our names and our emails at the bottom of every job posting. And people don't often use it. They're like, oh, I have to apply for the job and I can't talk to anybody. Well, there's a certain bit of things that you can ask prior, right? You can say, I'm interested in this. I'd like to know more. I'm interested, and I'd like to know if you substitute education for prior experience. We do here at the City of Tucson. We will substitute years of experience for education, and sometimes vice versa. We will substitute education for years of experience. So sometimes you just have to ask, and you wouldn't know unless you asked. And sometimes actually it's really on the job description. So if you scroll all the way to the bottom, it says like, you may substitute years of experience for education, or you may substitute education for years of experience. Sometimes people just don't make it all the way to the very bottom of the footer and they don't read. And then you go, well, yeah, it's on the job posting. It says substitute education for years of experience. So that's also a good lesson. Read.
I'm going to jump in real quick. I have a question about that.
Yes, ma'am.
I have one quick question about that.
Yeah.
What about LinkedIn? Can they reach out to you guys on LinkedIn if they have questions? If they have a LinkedIn profile?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. So we have about 2 minutes. Do you want to ask your last question, Namu?
Absolutely. Thank you, Letty and Diane, for the wonderful information. What are some of the most outdated things you've heard about resumes, interviews, cover letters, just in general? What are some of the outdated things you hear till date? Diane, since you're already unmuted.
Yeah, it's such a quick changing world. I think oftentimes some of the things that are outdated are the things that we like, for example, I don't want to see every single detail of what you've been doing. I just want a general picture with like your certifications and your highlights. And I think sometimes people are like they're spending too much time writing a novel, and I think that's just because that's what everyone expects them to do. It's a quick, fast-paced world. We don't need to see all of that anymore. Like we don't need to see the novels.
I agree with Diane. Definitely, yeah. Just highlight, your the most important skills. The other thing I have seen, and I don't see very often, is adding personal information on your resumes. I don't see that anymore. It's either, a LinkedIn address or your email, a phone number, and that's it. But yeah, sometimes I'll get some home addresses and so.
Do you prefer having like that personal information on there?
I don't think it's needed, right? Unless you're going to put it on an actual job application. I don't think a resume. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think in the old days we used to have like
Yes.
addresses because we literally used to mail things to you, and we used to actually ask. I remember when I used to have my resumes, I used to say like employer's address, because like in those days we used to, I don't know what we used to do. We used to mail things, I guess. I don't know. Like we don't need that. We like what company website, LinkedIn website, like we can find out that stuff nowadays, right? We can just figure that out. A city and state is good. Like we want to know you worked here in their city and state. We don't want like their PO box and their EIN number and everything else about them. Like, but we did use that. I remember we used to do that. I remember writing the address of like everything, my home address, my business address. So, no.
The reason not only because it was submitted by a student, but I was actually using an older Word document just to go through some templates, and one template popped up where it required you to put your full address under your name. So it's your name on the top with your full address, your email, and then your phone number. And I was like, wait, when did we start going back to full addresses? And then I realized it was from like 2005, and I was like, oh, this is like really old. But thank you for all your wonderful answers. I think it will benefit and help a lot of students out. Thank you so much. Rebecca, back to you.
Thank you so much for asking those great questions. So I know we're at time. We could talk about this stuff all night long, maybe a version 2 somewhere down the line. But I want to thank, our panelists for coming tonight and being so willing to share all this amazing insight. I want to thank Namu and Rochelle for being involved from the student side. It's amazing to have you guys. And Denise, do you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
I just want to thank you all. This was very helpful, entertaining, and you guys made it fun. And I think it's very useful information for all our students. And I was tweeting lots of information out, so you'll have to check it out later.
Awesome. Well, with that, you guys, I'll let you get back to your evenings. Thank you so much from Pima Community College. We look forward to working with you guys in the future. And just thank you. So have a great night, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Pima IT, you guys.